as you know, every day just after 9am here on Times Radio we discuss the biggest stories of the morning. Today we are in the company of Guto Harri, the former Downing Street Director of Communications. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, and also with Rebecca Hutson, the Editor-in-Chief at the News Movement. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning.
Morning to you both. Thanks for being here. Let's have a look through some of the stories we've been covering so far this morning on Times Radio Breakfast. Andy Burnham is promising to return the Labour Party to the party people once knew in his first speech.
That's a tongue twister.
As the new leader. He also took aim at the last 40 years of neoliberalism, promising to be a pro-business Prime Minister, while at the same time undoing the wrong turns taken in the 1980s. We've been speaking to Max Wilson, a former senior Labour advisor, when Ed Miliband was the party leader, and here he is on whether Burnham can unite this Labour Party.
My concern would be that when that aspiration makes contact with political reality, it might start to fall apart, because the nature of governing, that famous phrase, is to govern is to choose, and in choosing he might end up disappointing some members of the Labour Party, and in doing so he might then create some of that tension that he's trying to avoid.
Times columnist Fraser Nelson was also with us earlier, and he thinks that, popular with the party or not, selecting the current Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, to be Chancellor could make a real difference to the country.
You get primary school kids who aspire to be on benefits because when they look around, they can see the people working. I've got less money to spend than the people who aren't working. This is our economic problem. I do think Shabana Mahmood gets it, and I think as Chancellor, she would be encouraging of welfare reform and finally start to see the problem from the other end of a telescope, and that's what we've needed all along.
New laws are being drawn up by the government which will force employers to publish salary information in job ads. They also plan to ask industry groups whether information beyond basic salary, such as bonuses, should be made available. Angela Knight, former Conservative Minister, joined us, and she doesn't love the idea.
There's regulation after rule after requirement, and that is what is holding back the job market. Anything that is actually going to add to the issues of the job market at the moment by more rules, more requirement, more this or more that, is not going to help. And so to me, this is almost about finding a solution for a problem that doesn't exist.
Well, Bruce Daisley, he's an author and workplace culture expert, thinks overworked and underappreciated employees could do with more information.
Quite often we find that we end up not really getting paid. We end up sort of not getting the advantage that we wanted. And all these attempts to do is to try and give just a bit more balance of who has what information. So you'd broadly label this under the category of fairness.
So lots to get into with Guto and Rebecca, and we will add to the list as England prepare to kick off in tonight's World Cup third place playoff. It's the big one, folks. Which pointless occasions that nobody really wants anything to do with have you had to endure? You can text us or WhatsApp us. On WhatsApp it's 0333 003 2353.
Let's first, though, talk about the Labour leader, Andy Burnham. He got the job with no other contenders. He was dancing to New Order on stage yesterday. Does all this positivity run the risk of over-promising? We remember Nick Clegg and David Cameron in the Rose Garden in 2010. That display of peace and harmony in the Lib Dem Tory coalition, that didn't last long. Burnham won't be able to please all the people all the time for much longer.
We can be that party, the party that puts more power in people's hands, drives good growth in every postcode and puts hope in every heart, that gets the country pulling together again and moves beyond the divisions of recent years. All people and all places, public and private sectors, in a new sense of unity and common cause. That's my mission as your new leader, to bring back hope.
We hear that word again and again. Guto, from a communication strategy, they must have decided, right, what we're going to tell people is hope. That's what's coming. Is it an effective strategy, do you think, Guto?
Well, I, to quote Bill Clinton, still believe in a place called hope. I think it's a good sentiment, and I prefer it over fear, and I prefer it over, negative narratives about broken Britain and bad inheritance, and therefore we have to take these grim decisions. So it's a good start. I like the vibe. We have a guy who read English at university and is very eloquent, as well as having the common touch. But when you get beyond that to what he's now starting to spell out, it's really quite scary. The idea that what we need is stronger trade unions, even higher taxes, nationalising industries. There's a reason that Labour, when he talks about the Labour that people knew, that Labour Party was rejected time and time and time again. And a sobering thought for him, who has not won an election for the Labour Party, is that only 4 people have done since the Second World War. And they were Clement Attlee, Harold Wilson, Tony Blair, and Keir Starmer, who he's just basically toppled. So food for thought for Andy Burnham. Is not too late not to bring those horrible policies forwards under the guise of a nicer vibe.
Rebecca, where are you then from the sort of more fearful tendency, maybe where Guto is there, to the hopeful that Andy Burnham wants you to feel?
Well, I think being told that he wants to achieve hope in every heart feels a little bit like something I'd share on Instagram after I'd had a bad day. I'm with Guto. I think, vibes are great, but we really need to see a little bit more substance, don't we? And I think what he's trying to do is avoid what Starmer did when he came in 2024, and it was a sort of doom loop of everything's terrible, eat your greens, do your 10,000 steps a day, and it was all kind of relentlessly negative and awful. And it set up, his administration for, I think for failure. So, of course, we're all up for a bit of hope and we're all up for a bit of change. But I think what we were totally lacking yesterday, and it puts a lot of pressure on his speech on Monday, is any substance whatsoever. It's great to know how the bloke likes to take his tea, but I'd love to know a little bit more about what he's going to do to achieve this hope and change that he, spoke of so highly yesterday.
In spite of the sort of real lack of clarity over his plans, rather than, we know we've heard about devolution, or he wants to cut energy bills, maybe cap bus fares at £2. If you live in London, you might know they cost £1.75, so that doesn't sound great. But in amidst that, Guto, he is pretty popular at this point, becoming Prime Minister. When you look at these sort of net favourability ratings, he comes in at about -7, which doesn't sound good. But then you look at how other Prime Ministers compared a month before they entered office. Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak were on -35, Boris Johnson on -23, Starmer -20. How, Guto, if you are... So he's not hugely popular, but he's certainly not unpopular. How do you win the popularity contest as Prime Minister?
I think everybody scrubs up well for their wedding day, don't they? Even I look reasonably sort of smart, dressed up there, and it doesn't last till the following morning when you crawl out of bed with a hangover. And so I wouldn't rest too much on that. I think being popular is the wrong target, and that's one of the things that has become a pernicious influence in our politics. A combination of focus groups, opinion polls, 24-hour, 24/7 news and social media means that everybody's looking for the instant gratification. The leaders that we look back on and really admire are the leaders who ignore all that noise and do what they think is the right thing. And guess what? If you do the right thing and you fix the country, and you don't just hand us all a check now to make our energy bills lower this hot summer of ours, but you fix it by building more, nuclear power and renewable energy and all that by the end of your time in government, guess what? Off the back of that, you get popular as well as having done the right thing. And that's true popularity. And that's what somebody as bright and well-educated as him should be aiming for.
Yeah, how important is popularity, Rebecca? Because this is a Prime Minister in waiting until Monday. He keeps saying he'll expend quite a lot of political capital doing the hard things. And he's talking about social care there. How much has he got to spend, do you think?
Well, there'll be the Burnham bounce, weren't they? Rightly, and we're all kind of, I think everyone, regardless of how you feel about this government or the previous one, really want this to work. We've swapped our husband, as Guto says, quite a few times recently. So it'd be really great if this was the marriage that stuck. So I think we're all rooting for him. But popularity, as Guto says, is just not the right index. What people want is to see kind of demonstrable improvements to their lives. And to your point, Rosie, caps on bus fares when you're already paying less than £2 doesn't feel like a great place to start. But people want to feel better off. They want to feel like their public services are working, and they want to feel safe. And there was just none of that colouring in or detail in what we heard yesterday. It felt incredibly kind of inward looking and backward looking. There was no reference to some of the big challenges that we actually face as the country, and kind of reigniting the rows of the 1980s and taking us back to the 1970s, if I'm counting properly, doesn't feel like a particularly kind of inspiring or forward-looking programme of change.
But that comes on Monday, doesn't it, Rebecca? That he took over as Labour leader yesterday. Monday will be when he starts to get in the trenches of all of these things. There's reporting today that he is going to allow for more new North Sea oil and gas drilling, for example, which definitely tees up a bit of a row, but also gives the direction of growth and creating jobs and this idea of kind of reindustrialisation in the interests of good growth in every postcode, as he would have it.
But this is all sort of inference, isn't it? He's kind of apocryphal and a black box. We just don't know. I mean, I think Love Island contestants are, held to a high level of scrutiny than him at the moment, because at least there's a public vote and they get interviewed by Maya Jama. We just don't know. And I think, for his big ambition to get rid of this insidious briefing culture, which he's totally ignited by not telling us anything, and reindustrialization, absolutely. He's teased that. That wouldn't be a huge surprise. But there are huge gaps in what else is to come. What's his plan for AI? Where's the acknowledgement that we're a part of a global economy? Where was the reference to the 3 wars that are raging across the world? This is going to be a really long speech on Monday. I hope you guys are ready for it, because he's got so much detail.
Guto, strategically, what's the best thing he could do? If we've spent the last month saying we don't have a plan, as Rebecca's just outlined, we don't know what he's talking about, we don't have the detail. He's also said that he's tying himself really to the 2024 Labour manifesto, in which they won their landslide election victory. Is it that he has to sort of say, well, look, here's a 200-page document that I've just uploaded to the internet that has got my plans evolved out of the Labour Party manifesto plans of a couple of years ago? Is that what's required next week, that level of detail?
No, not at all. And, I think it's quite clever the way some of the grown-ups around him have created the space for him not to have to be bounced into picking a chancellor, or indeed anyone else, not to be bounced into committing to certain policies, because you need thinking time. And he takes over at a good time where he's got a whole summer without having to answer to Parliament. It may not be great for democracy, but it does, in the end, give him a chance to try and actually think outside the box and have a perspective that's a little bit beyond the sort of sound and fury of today. So I don't blame him for that. But I don't think it's a detailed plan. It's more about knowing the general direction he wants to go to and what he's prepared to do that. And the problem in the end, the fundamental choice for him is he prepared to upset the Labour Party and his, Labour backbenchers in particular? Because if he is, then he might do the things that are needed to fix the country. Or is he prepared, because his only audience that he cares about is being a popular Labour leader, to sort of spook the markets, upset the rest of us, and trash the country? And, I think my answer to that is, you can probably guess what it is. I really hope that he's brave enough to give mood music to the Labour Party, rub their bellies and all that, but take hard-headed decisions that may be initially, certainly in the short term, painful, but are needed to fix the country.
Yeah, it's really interesting, all of that. Thank you both very much. For now, lots more to come with Guto and Rebecca over the next few minutes. Starting salaries and job ads, is that fairer? Is that the transparency that we need? And is England prepared to try to win a bronze medal? Do you get a bronze medal? I guess you probably do. At the World Cup. When did you have to go through the motions for a fairly pointless exercise? It is called the Bronze Medal World Cup match, I'm told. There you are. The pointless third place playoff.
It's even pointless to watch. It starts at 10 p.m. tonight. I have watched
staying up? You've
every
watched
game.
Them all?
I know, but this one's going to be so sad. Apparently Bellingham's not even going to play, which Will Hobbs from TalkSport earlier told us that was a good decision.
Yeah, if I was him, I'd have naffed off to Greece by now for my holidays.
But you could score more goals.
Yeah.
Golden Boot's still there to play for.
Fair enough, I suppose.
So Mbappe will be trying to get that, and Harry Kane, I think. Anyway, but the bigger debate we've got before that is what do we do about salaries? All of that to come. But right now you're listening to Times Radio Breakfast with Rosie, Wright and Calum Macdonald on Times Radio with Handelsbanken. Real relationship banking. Start your conversation at handelsbanken.co.uk.
Good morning to you. Thank you so much for all of your texts that you're sending in on the various conversations that have been provoked this morning. Simon says, while there is a lack of detail with Andy Burnham, one thing he's right about is the abject failure of neoliberalism. Guto's Conservative friends have had their way since 1976 facts and look at the state of the country, it's a place where very little works and poverty's continued to go up.
The £2 bus fare has been a real divider. Catherine says, I love the idea, but a few more buses would make it even better. That's from the rural north. Joe says, talk about London perspectives. Bus fares there may be £1.75. Where I live, the last bus service, which ran twice a week to the nearest large town, has just been cancelled as the local council won't subsidise it anymore. Burnham isn't offering anything to rural communities like mine.
Thank you for these. You can WhatsApp us 0333 003 2353. We're in the company of Rebecca Hutson, Editor-in-Chief at the News Movement, and Guto Harri, former Downing Street Director of Communications. Let's talk about salaries, a favourite subject of people in the UK, and how much you get paid for your job. The government's drawing up plans to require employers to publish the starting salary or a grade in job adverts. Ministers want to improve transparency. Are salaries somewhere where there is a lack of transparency currently, Rebecca, do you think? I'm trying to work out if this is addressing a sort of a pay-related transparency issue at the right point in the process.
I think this is such a brilliant idea. They do it in America, and we have an office in America, and it makes recruitment a much fairer, much equal, much more transparent process. And I hope we really do introduce it here. You know, so many people are socialised out of talking about money. Women, people of colour, minority groups, people who don't go to posh schools and are sort of, taught how to debate. And actually kind of understanding the value of the role that you're being asked to do, and being paid fairly for the work and the job that you're going to take on, I think is really important. And I think for too long, employers have kind of had the upper hand in recruitment. And I think something like this, which lays out exactly the market value of the job you're applying for and doesn't rely on that kind of awkward negotiation where, you're not sure how much to ask for, you're not sure if you're going to kind of discount, get yourself out of the process if you ask for too much. I think all of that angst goes away. And I think especially for women who are, who are sort of taught to be, silent and awkward about money, I think something like this makes the process far fairer. So I think we should do it now, starting with what Guto's paid for doing this.
That's a very good question.
Guto, over to you.
I don't think there's anything silent or awkward about Rebecca. And I think this idea that, yet again, what we need are sort of career civil servants in whatever quango is set up to do this, to intervene and tell people that, certain categories of people are underprivileged and all that, and therefore those rare and precious people who actually create job opportunities and create and deliver growth need to have somebody breathing down their neck even more. It totally misses the point. They should get off their backs. Somebody trying to build a small business is struggling usually to work out at which point they can afford to appoint somebody else. And when they're appointing them, they're not doing painting by numbers. They're not saying if I get a white public school boy, I'll pay him more. They're saying if I get somebody who's experienced enough, then from day one, he or she will bring in business, will add to the bottom line, I can pay them more. If I get somebody brilliant but inexperienced, and it's going to take a little while to mentor him or her to get to the point where they're bringing in money, I'd like to pay them a little less. There's nothing wrong with that. This transparency thing is a fetish, and it's getting in the way of economic growth, which should be paramount.
That's part of the problem, Rebecca, isn't it? Is that, well, even in your newsroom, there will be different qualities that some individuals have, which means they are worth more to you than others, even if they're doing the same job.
But then you can have a salary band. It just prompts a conversation about the value of the role and why you're potentially paying someone with more experience more and someone with less experience less. Otherwise these conversations happen at the Christmas party or at the pub, and no one feels very good. When they find out that the person sitting next to them is earning more. And I sort of disagree with Guto's point. White public school boys do earn pretty well. I think that's normally why their parents send them to those schools in the first place. And actually levelling that playing field and giving everyone the opportunity to kind of negotiate their value and understand the value of that job to the company they're going to work for, I think kind of rebalances the relationship between employer and employee, and is all for the better.
It does also give you, Guto, a benchmark from which to start from, because sometimes you think, well, I actually don't even know what bracket we're looking at. And I think probably, I don't want to speak for all women, but we may very much likely undervalue what we can offer rather than overvalue. And I've worked at somewhere where by accident an email got sent round by HR that was then tried to be rapidly recalled but unsuccessfully, that revealed someone's salary, and it caused total immediate upset. It's helpful, Guto, if you know at least a benchmark of where you should be valuing yourself.
I think we have a benchmark, don't we? You know the vague number for entry-level jobs across different professions, and if it's a top London law firm, it's shockingly high at the moment. And guess what? They recruit a lot of women as well as men there, not all of them from
But maybe not an entry-level job. Maybe you're, I don't know, 10 years into your career.
In the middle of your career, there's all kinds of situations. I've done jobs, when I was in full-time employment, for instance, at the BBC, where I know that somebody else has been paid more for that job, where a woman was paid more for doing the same job after me, but I wasn't resentful.
So how do you know? Did you ask them?
Well, it was published because the BBC has to publish salaries now. So I know that what was published for somebody who came after me to run the position I did was earning a lot more than me. But she had been somewhere else. She'd been in the commercial sector, and therefore the cost of getting her back to the BBC was higher than the cost of keeping me in the BBC. So I didn't put it down to gender. I didn't put it down to sort of favoritism. I didn't put it down to a conversation at Christmas party. It's just one of those things. There are many dynamics that feed into what somebody can and needs to be paid.
But you think that was fair. So what often happens is people find out and they think, oh my gosh, they're getting 20 grand more than me. That's what, if you don't have salary transparency, you can't then fight for equality.
Well, in the end, not all animals are equal, or rather, a fairer way and more accurate way of putting it, we're all at different stages, not just at different ages, where, generally you would imagine that the older presenters on Times Radio are perhaps paid a little more than you bright
those
young
in their 30s.
and those who've been there for 30 or 40 years or actually have earned massive salaries elsewhere, their salaries may reflect that. It's not because somebody's out to get you and to undermine you and all that. And I don't think it helps to have this voyeuristic fetish about what other people earn. Earn what you can yourself, and if it's not enough, find somebody who'll pay you more.
I think one of the questions, one of the things on transparency I think actually would be more helpful is a metric for what equals value in a certain place, because you can be left trying to guess. I'm absolutely flogging myself here every day in, day out, working long hours, delivering. Why am I paid less than the person next to me who's clocking off at 5 p.m. every single day? So it's maybe a sort of clarity of you will be rewarded if you've been here for 5 years. Do you think? I'm not sure it would. I'm not sure it would, because I think if you're in a private sector job where you are busting a gut every day, you're posting great numbers, you're meeting targets, etc., and the person next to you is coasting along doing very little, but is absorbed as part of a team that is extremely successful, then actually the metrics are really clear there. If they're not contributing in the same way, they should be paid less.
I guess that's down to your manager's discretion.
Absolutely.
Because they should hopefully be able to see that.
And the nature of the work you're in as well, I suppose.
Shall we move on? I'm enjoying this conversation so much, but shall we move on very quickly to England v France? It should have been the final. Instead, the two losing semi-finalists meet tonight for the prize of third place in the World Cup. There is a rumour that Jude Bellingham won't be playing, which feels like a real shame. Is this a pointless exercise? Rebecca, I've watched every single game and was prepared to stay up at ridiculous times and then come and do a breakfast show the next day because I love the football. I'm not sure I'm going to watch all of tonight. Is that an awful thing to say? Are you going to be watching, Rebecca?
No, I'm not. I don't think history is written by the team that comes third in the World Cup. So I agree with you. I think I'd rather go to bed. And I'd love to tell you that the reason Jude Bellingham isn't going is because he's hanging out with me, but that would be telling me too much.
Guto, what is the point in the third place playoff?
No, I'm not interested in football, so I wouldn't really want to watch anyway. But if you are interested in football, then surely a game between England and France, ancient rivals, some would say enemies, is worth watching. Certainly with the quality of the players there, it would be a game worth watching. There are people who've travelled halfway around the world and spent an absolute fortune to be there at the game tonight. I think it's the ultimate sort of arrogance to think that this game is beneath you and not turn up for it, even if you're Mr. Bellingham. How shocking, how appalling. These guys are paid an absolute fortune of footballers. It's their their job to turn up and play every game. And if you're only chasing the glory of being numero uno and you don't care about the bronze medal, there lies a clue perhaps as to why England, for my entire lifetime, I was born the year England last won the World Cup. There lies a clue as to why they don't quite get there, because...
But the emotion isn't the same, is it, Guto?
Hard yards all over.
You know, this is a game of passion and emotion, and it's going to be very hard. The way you'd play if you thought the final was in your grasp is very different to when it's not.
You're still out there to beat the French. I mean, if that doesn't motivate an English player, you know, what does? Just talk about Napoleon and, you know.
Maybe they could unfurl a banner at the end.
But what would that say? The English
Waterloo,
fans, they get
Agincourt, Trafalgar, just, you know, get them riled up.
Your boys took a hell of a beating.
Teach a little history to these overpaid, you know, England football players. Teach them a little bit of history, and maybe that will get them going against France.
It will feel very good if we beat France, I have to say. Thank you both very much. It has been a pleasure, as it always is. Guto Harri, former Downing Street Director of Communications, and also Rebecca Hutson, Editor-in-Chief of the News Movement. Thank you both.
Thanks, both.
Sounds like then both of them aren't going to be watching the game.
No, neither am I. And are you TBC?
I'll watch a little. I'm TBC. I'm to be persuaded. I'm definitely going to watch the final on Sunday, and we'll be
fair.
cheering.
I think even I might watch the final on Sunday. I quite like the sense of occasion. Oh, mind you, I think am I at the theatre on Sunday night?
8 p.m. kick-off. I'll be cheering as loudly as South London can hear for Spain.